March 24th, 1945. Berlin. 24 German Me-262 jet fighters, the fastest, deadliest aircraft in the sky, dove toward American bombers over the Third Reich's capital. The Luftwaffe pilots were flying machines that could hit 540 miles per hour. Their targets? Lumbering B-17s doing barely 180. The men who shot them down, they weren't supposed to be there at all. This is the story of how America's first black fighter pilots went from being called an experiment doomed to fail to becoming the most requested bomber escorts in the European theater. And it's not for the faint of heart. Let's rewind to 1925. The U.S. Army War College publishes a study. The conclusion? Compared to the white man, African Americans are admittedly of inferior mentality, inherently weak in character, cowards in the face of danger, unfit for combat. For 16 years, that garbage sat on the books as official military doctrine. Black men had been trying to become pilots since World War I. Every single one got rejected. Eugene Bullard had to fly for France because America wouldn't let him near a cockpit. He became the first black combat pilot, but not for the United States. But by 1940, everything changed, not because hearts and minds shifted, but because the math didn't lie. Germany was steamrolling through Europe, Japan was carving up Asia, and America desperately needed pilots, lots of them. So President Roosevelt, under pressure from his wife Eleanor, the NAACP, and black newspapers like the Chicago Defender, authorized an experimental program. The civilian pilot training program would now accept African Americans. The military establishment hated it. They picked Tuskegee, Alabama for the training site, deep in Jim Crow territory, expecting, hoping even, that these men would wash out. Here's what they didn't count on. The men who showed up weren't random recruits. They were college graduates, scientists, Olympians, men who'd already earned their wings in civilian programs, men who had to be twice as good to get half as far, and they knew it. The first class started with 13 cadets in July 1941. Only 5 graduated, but Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who'd endured 4 years of complete isolation at West Point where nobody would speak to him, eat with him, or room with him, was one of them. He became the first African-American officer to graduate from U.S. Army Air Corps pilot training, making him America's first black military pilot of the modern era. The experiment was designed for them to fail. Instead, they were about to make history. But here's a question for you. We've talked about how they fought 2 wars, one against the Nazis and one against racism at home. Which war do you think was harder to win? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you think. You think passing flight school meant the end of their problems? It was only the beginning. At Selfridge Army Airfield in Michigan, 9 officers from the 332nd became the first African Americans assigned to non-segregated training. Sounds progressive, right? The base commander immediately banned all black officers from the officers' club. It nearly caused a race-level confrontation before higher command stepped in. Down in Tuskegee itself, the training was identical to what white pilots received. Same coursework, same aircraft, same standards. But off base, a local laundry refused to wash their uniforms. The same laundry happily cleaned clothes for captured German POWs. Let that sink in. Nazi prisoners got better treatment than American officers, and it got darker. At Biloxi, Mississippi, during basic training, one cadet went into town alone one night. He never came back. They found his body later. Nobody was ever charged. This was the reality. They were training to fight fascism overseas while living under it at home. The military was testing whether black men could fly complex aircraft. What they proved instead was something the Pentagon didn't want to hear. These men weren't just capable, they were exceptional. By April 1943, the 99th Fighter Squadron, flying P-40 Warhawks, shipped out to North Africa. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Davis, Jr. commanded them. Their first mission? Operation Corkscrew. Time to see if the experiment would hold up in combat, and the Germans were about to find out what these pilots could do. June 2nd, 1943. The island of Pantelleria sits 50 miles off Tunisia, bristling with Italian coastal guns and German radar stations. The Allies need it secured before invading Sicily, so they're going to try something never done before: defeat an enemy position using air power alone. No ground invasion. The 99th Fighter Squadron gets the call. These pilots have zero combat experience. They're going up against battle-hardened Luftwaffe and Italian fighters who've been shooting at Allied aircraft for 3 years. The white officers attached to other squadrons are openly skeptical. Some are hoping they fail, but there's one guy who believes in them. Colonel Philip "Flip" Cochrane. Yes, the real-life inspiration for Terry and the pirates. Cochrane takes the 99th pilots aside and teaches them everything about air combat that training never covered. "Cochrane helped us learn how to fight," pilot Span Watson would remember later. On June 2nd, they fly their first combat mission, strafing runs over Pantelleria. No losses. The next week during patrol, 6 of their P-40s get bounced by enemy fighters diving from high altitude, likely German Bf-109s. The Americans react instantly, break formation, maneuver defensively. All 6 return to base, some damage, but no casualties. June 11th, Pantelleria surrenders, first military position in history taken primarily by air power. The Tuskegee Airmen helped write that page. Then, on July 2nd, over Sicily, Captain Charles Hall spots 2 enemy fighters, likely Machi C-202S, though the encounter is often remembered as FW-190s. He gets on one's tail, fires, and watches it spiral down trailing smoke. The first aerial victory by a Tuskegee Airman goes into the books. But back home, Time magazine runs a story questioning their effectiveness. Senior Army officers request the 99th be pulled from frontline duty for poor combat performance. Davis gets called to the Pentagon to defend his squadron. What happens next shuts everyone up. January 1944. Allied forces land at Anzio, trying to flank German defenses and break the stalemate in Italy. It's a bloodbath on the beaches. The Luftwaffe throws everything at those landing craft. The 99th Fighter Squadron is assigned to provide air cover. Over 2 days of vicious aerial combat, 11 pilots from the squadron shoot down 13 German fighters, not 12, 13, in 48 hours. The skeptics in Washington go silent. Any talk of pulling the 99th from combat dies instantly. By February, 3 more all-black squadrons arrive in Italy: the 100th, 301st, and 302nd. Together with the 99th, they form the 332nd Fighter Group. Davis takes command and gets promoted to colonel. Now they're flying Republic P-47 Thunderbolts. When the ground crews paint the tails bright red for identification, bomber crews start calling them the Red Tails. White bomber pilots who'd never even met these men start specifically requesting them as escorts. Why? Because word spreads fast in a combat zone. The Red Tails stick with you. They don't abandon bombers to chase personal glory or rack up ace status. Their job is protection, and they're damn good at it. The Luftwaffe notices too. German pilots start reporting encounters with Schwarze Vogelmenschen, Blackbird men. It's said with a mix of respect and wariness. These aren't the inferior pilots Nazi propaganda promised them. In June 1944, over northeastern Italy, the 332nd Escorts bombers toured targets in southern Germany. German fighters swarm them. 5 Me-109s go down. 1 Red Tail doesn't make it back. July 1944. They transition to North American P-51 Mustangs, the aircraft they'll become most famous for, flying red spinners, yellow wing bands, and those distinctive all-red tails. Now they can escort bombers deeper into German territory than ever before, and the missions get deadlier. Let's talk about March 24th, 1945 again, because what happened over Berlin that day deserves its own chapter. The target, the Daimler-Benz tank factory in the heart of the Reich. It's a 1,600-mile round trip, the longest bomber escort mission the 15th Air Force ever flew. Colonel Davis personally leads the 332nd on this one. The Germans know they're coming. They scramble everything: FW-190s, ME-109s, and 24 of those ME-262 jets, Hitler's wonder weapon. These things are revolutionary first operational jet fighters in history. They can outrun, outclimb, and outgun anything the Allies have. On paper, it's not even a contest. But here's what the intelligence reports miss. Yes, the Me-262 is faster, but speed isn't everything. The jets need long, straight approaches to line up their shots. One tight turn, and they bleed energy. The P-51 Mustang turns on a dime. First, Lieutenant Roscoe Brown spots a Me-262 making a pass at the bombers. He dives, getting on the jet's tail. The German pilot tries to run. Bad choice. Brown stays with him through a series of turns. Using the new K-14 lead computing gun sight, he fires. The jet's engine explodes. It cartwheels into the German countryside. Second Lieutenant Charles Brantley engages another Me-262. The German pilot is Oberleutnant Ernst Werner, an accomplished ace. Brantley outmaneuvers him. Think about that, outmaneuvering a jet in a propeller plane, and pours rounds into the 262's fuselage. Werner dies in the cockpit. His jet crashes. First Lieutenant Earl Lane, blessed with extraordinary eyesight, spots a third Me-262 from 2,000 yards out. He calculates the deflection, turns hard left, and fires while in the turn. The computing gun sight does its job. The jet goes down. 3 German Me-262s, 1 mission. The Red Tails just beat the future with technology from the past. The bombers hit their target. The 332nd earns its 3rd Distinguished Unit Citation. Secretary of War Henry Stimson personally commends them. But here's the thing nobody talks about. They didn't do this for glory. They did it because 60 B-17s full of American boys needed to get home, and the Red Tails never forgot what their job was. Let's not romanticize this. War is hell, and these men paid for every victory. 66 Tuskegee Airmen died in combat. Another 84 were killed in training and non-combat missions. 32 became prisoners of war. That's 182 men who didn't come home out of roughly 450 who deployed overseas. Second Lieutenant Robert Martin flew as Charles Brantley's wingman on that Berlin mission. He made it home. 73 years later, in July 2018, he died at age 99 in Illinois. The day before the announcement, they identified the remains of his squadron mate from a crash site in Austria inside the wreckage. A ring inscribed from a wife to her husband, dated 1943. 26. Tuskegee Airmen still remain unrecovered, 26 families who never got closure. And when the survivors came home, Jim Crow was waiting. The same men who'd escorted bombers over Berlin, who'd shot down jets, who'd earned distinguished flying crosses. They couldn't eat at certain restaurants, couldn't use certain water fountains, couldn't stay at certain hotels. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend flew 142 combat missions, got home and had to use the colored entrance. In one southern town, a white woman refused a blood transfusion because it came from a black donor, would rather die than accept that the blood pumping through her veins was identical, regardless of melanin, but something had shifted. At Freeman Field, Indiana in 1945, 101 black officers refused to sign a statement accepting segregated officers' clubs. They were arrested, charged with mutiny. A young lawyer named Thurgood Marshall defended them. Most charges were dropped, but the military couldn't ignore what happened. The Tuskegee Airmen proved something the old guard couldn't deny anymore. Competence has no color. Courage has no color. These men didn't just fight the Luftwaffe, they fought an entire system, and they won both wars. The Tuskegee Airmen's story gets told everywhere, but not always accurately. And these men deserve the truth, not the folklore. You've heard the line, the Red Tails never lost a bomber. It's repeated in movies, documentaries, even official ceremonies. But Air Force records show they lost about 25 bombers, still far fewer than most escort groups, some of which lost more than 100. The myth stuck. Because during a distinguished unit citation review in 1945, their commanders highlighted a specific 6-month stretch, September 1944 to March 1945. When they did lose 0 over time, that detail became never lost any. But here's what's actually more impressive. The Red Tails flew the toughest missions, deep raids, the longest escorts, the most dangerous routes. While other groups chased personal glory and easy kills, the 332nd stayed welded to their bombers. That discipline saved lives. Take Lee Buddy Archer Jr., officially credited with 4 aerial victories. He believed he had 5, the magic number that makes an ace. His gun camera footage supported it, but the confirmation vanished in the bureaucracy. He died in 2010 without the recognition he earned. That's what these men were fighting too. A system slow to credit their achievements, and they didn't start with top-tier equipment. Their first aircraft in Italy were P-40 Warhawks, already outdated by 1943. German fighters could outclimb, outrun, and outdive them. The Red Tails still made the P-40 work when they finally received P-51 Mustangs in July '44. They became one of the most effective escort groups in the war. The mission logs prove it. In June 1944, near Toulon, Captain Wendell Pruitt and Second Lieutenant Gwyn Pearson strafed a German destroyer so aggressively that the crew had to scuttle the ship. 2 fighters, 1 destroyer, completely real. Or Harry Stewart Jr., 43 combat missions, 3 enemy aircraft shot down in a single day over Austria, Distinguished Flying Cross in hand. Even in his 90s, he was still teaching kids that hard work could take them anywhere. They weren't superheroes. They were men, brilliant, imperfect, determined men who achieved what no one believed possible. And that truth is far more powerful than any legend. July 26, 1948. Truman signs Executive Order 9981. The U.S. military will desegregate immediately. And you can trace that decision straight back to the men from Tuskegee. Their record was undeniable. 1,578 combat missions, over 15,000 sorties, 112 enemy aircraft shot down, another 150 destroyed on the ground, nearly 1,000 vehicles wrecked, and even a destroyer sunk by strafing. They earned 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, hundreds of air medals, multiple unit citations, a Silver Star, and more Bronze and Purple Hearts than most units ever see. But the numbers aren't the real story. Bomber crews requested Red Tail escorts. German pilots respected the Black Birdmen. And from September 44 to March 45, they didn't lose a single bomber on escort runs, while other groups were getting mauled. Colonel Charles McGee flew 49 combat missions across 3 wars and lived to 102. At his funeral, 4 red-tailed F-16 roars roared overhead in tribute. Benjamin O. Davis Jr., once shunned at West Point, became the Air Force's first black 4-star general. Chappie James became the first black 4-star in any branch. They didn't crack barriers. They blew them off the hinges. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the surviving airmen, about 300 of them. By 2023, only 3 were still alive. Their legacy won't fade. It's welded into the backbone of the U.S. military and into the country they changed forever. But their story, that'll outlive all of us. So what started as an experiment designed to prove black men couldn't fly became proof that they could fly better than almost anyone. The same military establishment that wanted them to fail ended up begging them to serve the German pilots who laughed at rumors of inferior American pilots, learned to fear the Red Tails. The Luftwaffe aces who thought Me-262 jets made them invincible found out that skill beats speed. But if you think this was the only lesson that Germans learned the hard way, check out this video where we tell you a story about the day German spies knew it was over.